And welcome to the Frommer Travel Show. I'm your host, Pauline Frommer. As folks who listen to this podcast a lot know, during the pandemic, I adopted a pandemic puppy. My daughter begged for the dog, and we ended up getting it despite the fact that we had two cats who hated the dog, but they eventually ended up being okay. And very recently, for the first time, I traveled with said dog, and I made every mistake in the book. Something that I wish I had read my next guest's article before I hit the road. She is Danielle Gelfand. She wrote a fabulous article in the New York Times. They have a whole section called Travel 101, and the article is called How to Travel with a Pet. Hey, Danielle, thank you so much for appearing on the Frommer Travel Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to hear what happened with your dog.
Well, you talk about your first travels with your pet. Mine had much less planning that went into it. My husband's a professor at Columbia. I knew I had to go to Mystic, Connecticut for a couple of days to research there. And so, really, at the last minute, I just threw the dog into the car and went. I did get a pet friendly hotel, but tell us about how you came to this subject and what I should have done in terms of planning first for where to take the dog.
Okay, well, I should say that I love your story of a pandemic puppy. My daughter also, who is now almost 9, had been asking for a dog for so long. And,
Yeah.
I'm a TV producer, and also a writer, and so I view things in quarters. So I kept promising her a dog in Q4 of some year someday. I and then at the beginning of a summer, she said, a couple years ago, "Why not now?" And I was like, "Oh god, but we have all these fun plans lined up," but I didn't have a good answer for her, so I said, "Okay, we can get the dog." But once my second question was like, "Okay, what are we gonna do with the dog? Like, how do you travel with a dog?" And especially, a young dog, then a puppy, who is she's a Chiweenie, so she's part Chihuahua, part Dachshund, which means, like, relaxed and calm she's not, and frankly, neither is anyone in my family. So, I started researching it and talking to different people, and, it's kind of a rabbit hole. Like, if it's something, if you don't sort of think about it,
Yeah,
um, and, you know and it's such a it's much more, complex than I ever thought possible depending on your destination, and so, earlier this year, I pitched, Amy Versham a bunch of ideas. I'd been doing some travel pieces, and I said, like, "What about traveling with your pet?"
she
And
is the editor of the travel section of the New York Times. That's who Amy Versand is.
Yes, apologies,
Yes.
yes. So it was a go, and I literally had no idea how complex it was, as I said. So I think there are many steps, and, like anything else, you kind of can chunk down the steps. So the first thing is you wanna talk to your vet. Okay. And you want to
Sure.
talk to your vet about whether or not your dog is a good candidate for travel on like a million fronts,
Huh.
including, especially short nosed dogs, for example. There are often issues, and like the certain airlines won't let like short nosed dogs fly because they have trouble breathing in the air.
Ah,
Or, is your dog anxious, and those kind of things. And so that's the first thing about like what does your vet think that your dog, who knows your dog or your cat or
sure.
whatever, if they're a good candidate for travel? And also,
Well,
like,
and
what
also what type of travel? I thought you made an excellent point about
Yes,
different destinations and what the requirements are. Like if it's a major hiking destination and you have a lap dog, who's not used to being on trails and, going up to high altitudes, it might be not a great vacation for a dog. Because even though we think of dogs as being more active than human beings, they sleep 18 hours a day and they're often not.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, I was scrolling through Instagram, being like, who are all these dogs that are like with their people, like on beaches and like on trails? I'm like, our dog would last like all of 12 minutes and then would be bored. She's little, whatever. Like, so, you know, yes, I think thinking about what type of vacation is, how long the vacation is, like kind of the same things that you would think about, are you a good fit for this kind of vacation? Is about like, would your dog be a good, and also, I think it's not that easy to actually bring your pet to a lot of international destinations. There are like lots and lots of steps. There are a lot of requirements. I think people think maybe it's cheaper to do it, but I wonder if in the end it's kind of a wash because, you have to pay for all these forms and medications and tests and all these things depending on where you go.
Right.
And the other thing that I thought was interesting, even about locally, is like, you know, many states. So there's international travel, which is one thing.
Sure.
Interstate travel is really regulated by this. It's regulated by the state that you're going to. So many states have their own requirements, which I was floored that, okay, if you're going through Nevada, and that's one of many, many, many states that have a requirement, like you need a health form, and I believe that you need like a rabies form saying, that your dog doesn't have rabies if you're going to stay there. Not if you're driving through the state, if you're going to California and going from Ohio, you drive it through, but if you're stopping, and which is not about, like, whether or not that's enforced, that's a different thing, but nonetheless, I was
Sure.
shocked. I
No,
didn't know.
I was shocked too that you would need that kind of paperwork just to go from state to state. Now, I don't know how anybody would ever get stopped, you
Right.
know, but nowadays, well, people are being stopped all the time for a lot of things. Anyway, yeah, so
And
that,
also, you
yeah,
need to, and this is the other thing that shocked me was, I had a dog growing up, which, we had a dog now for almost 2 years, and that for most paperwork, you need a USDA certified accredited veterinarian,
right.
which,
I didn't
you
even know
know,
that existed. I've
I
never asked
I
my
didn't
veterinarian for a license.
know a USDA accredited vet. And I called my vet, and my vet is not a USDA accredited vet. It doesn't mean she's like an amazing vet, but for specific paperwork, and I think for all the different paperwork you need to do serious travel, that's who you need to go to, certainly for international travel. So, but and they say actually for national travel as well, for, domestic, anything on planes. So
Sure.
I think to simplify, talk to your vet first and then find out, okay, well, your vet will know. Your vet's gonna know all the minutia. And I think it's easy to get caught up once you go down the rabbit hole to be like, you go to one website and another website, and everybody has different rules and regulations, right?
Yeah,
So it's yours, the airline, there's the destination, whether it's a
right.
country or a state or whatever.
Well, let's get
Yeah.
airlines off the table first, because one of the things that wasn't in your article that I happen to know
Oh,
because I've had friends who've traveled with dogs is there's only a certain number of spaces for dogs on planes. They limit the number that they will carry. And so sometimes you have to plan and book well in advance if you want to take your dog with you. Otherwise, you will not find a space for that dog. They're not going to have a whole plane full of dogs. They only allow a couple of them for each flight. So that's something else you have to worry about if you're going to do that. But let's focus on road trips because I think that's going to
okay.
be much more common. Although some
Okay.
people do travel with their pets overseas, and we could talk about that. So in your article, you say you have to look at the type of vacation it is for your dog. You don't want it to be too crazy active because your dog may be a dog who mostly sleeps on the couch and is going to get exhausted. I had no idea dogs can get sunburns. That was
Me either. I know. I
who
just
knew?
and cats too, so you wanna keep them. The interesting thing to me when I was doing this piece was so many of the tips that were given were the same things that you would apply to kids, to people in general, like, and sort of common sense stuff, but you're like, "I didn't know that about my dog." So, you
Right.
know, Dr. Bailey, who's the head of the American Veterinary Medical Association, he said, "Okay, if your dog is a couch potato, like, don't take them to Big Sur hiking," I think was the example that he gave, right?
Yeah.
But I think, like, you know, that's true of, it's like you wanna do something that you've normally done before, and I think the biggest another really great tip in that piece was, test it out first, like, test out your pet and
Right.
you and see what works for you. Go to a hotel for 1 night before you book 10 nights across the country, and see how you both do. And so in
Or
our
take your
case,
dog on a car ride if you don't
take your
usually do
dog on a
that.
car ride. Take your dog and don't have it be like a 6-hour car ride.
Right.
See if your dog does a 1-hour car ride. What I learned for our dog is that she does not like the car. She's a rescue from Texas. I don't know what happened on the way here, but
Mhm.
she really looks like she's, like, curled up, like she doesn't
Aw.
enjoy it. And also, I realized that when we went for a short trip that she, really like, it was stressful. Nicole Ellis, who is a pet expert, said, "Decide if it's right for you and your family." And truthfully, my husband was so stressed out because he thought that she was gonna go to the bathroom everywhere, and then it was like, how long is too long, and was she comfortable there? It just was stressful, so,
Right, right. Well, okay, yeah. So going back to picking where you had to go, I had to do this research trip. I'm updating the Connecticut chapter of our New England book. And so the first thing I had to do was go to a museum, and I hadn't checked into my hotel yet. And so I did the biggest no no. I left the dog in the car, but we have the kind of car that allows you to set the temperature even when you're not in the car. So I was setting the temperature from inside this museum, but I was so nervous. I kept running back out to the car to check on the dog, waking her up each time. She was fine. She's been in cars a lot, so she was fine in the car.
That's
But that's something else you need to worry about is if you're going to leave the dog for certain amounts of time, how do you make sure, as you said, this is just like children, how do you make sure the hotel room is pet proofed, as in like child proofed? And how do you make sure they're going to be comfortable? So, if you can give some tips for pet proofing and also for making sure that your pup or cat is comfortable in the room.
Sure. I mean, I think that, you know so the things I didn't think about, and this is also if you have a cat, right? But you wanna make sure the windows are secure, that there are no escape routes. Your pet should also be wearing a collar with your contact information, and a rabies vaccination tag at all times. At hotels, you want to request a room away from stairwells and elevators because, and I didn't realize this, dogs are sensitive to sound. Keep a do not disturb sign on the door, and also look into, like, Airbnbs, right? Like, that's probably a lot easier than a hotel room because it's bigger, hopefully. You wanna make sure above all else, you wanna have proper ventilation, even with air conditioning. I remember Dr. Bailey talking about, he suggested bringing a small fan with covered blades so your pet can sit, like, inside the cooling breeze. And with cars, you're to go back for a second, you don't wanna leave your pet alone for a long time. Keep it brief. That's what all the experts said.
Oh,
Um,
I did not do that, and she did seem stressed when I would get back. She was nervous.
but you live and learn,
You live and
He
learn.
also
You live
said,
and
like,
learn.
if your pet's crate trained, bring a collapsible crate for comfort and security while you're gone. And then something I thought was really interesting, like, leave the TV or radio on so they don't feel alone, which I was like, "Oh, you know what?" Like, it's funny, I think, my mom likes to leave the TV on sometimes just so she doesn't feel alone, like, so we're like humans, And then obviously you can contact, like, pet sitters, you can see if there's someplace you can drop off your dog or cat, but you probably need to set that up in advance. And, there are tons of apps that you can use for pet sitters, and you wanna meet the person before you, of course, have
Yeah.
them come sit just like you would with a child. I think you really wanna be careful, and you wanna maintain your pet's regular feeding schedule and walking, routine, like, the same way with kids, like, you wanna keep their comfort items there. And Dr. Bailey says, "Never leave pets, unattended in cars." And they all said that,
I
sorry,
know.
because you can get heat stroke really quickly,
Right.
and you wanna secure pets in harnesses and position them away from airbags. And keep them on a leash. Okay, it's a long list, but,
So, yeah, it's a long list, and if you are going to go to a hotel, there are pet-friendly hotels. I went to this cheapo motel. It was absolutely fine, clean, $65 a night, can't beat that,
amazing.
and it was $75 for the pet for 3 nights, but it was so pet-friendly, I kept hearing woofs and sounds as I was going down the hall, and they had special hangers for the door, that said there was a pet in there, and they told me that the maids would not be making up the room, unless I was there personally, which I thought was a great idea.
That's
So,
fantastic.
yeah, I
And I
just
think even
stumbled onto that.
there are lots of really great, I think, one time, I can't remember if it was the Lowe's, there's some hotel chain that I, like, looked down and there's, like, a pet check-in, they have, like, they give them, like, a little treat or whatever, and so I think, like, it's comforting to go someplace where there are other pets, right? I mean, obviously, hopefully your dog or
Yeah,
cat can, interact with other people, like, they're okay with them, but, that they're used to having pets, so it's not such a big deal.
yeah. Is there any other big thing that we haven't mentioned that we should have talked about in terms of traveling with pets? I mean, it's also a joy. I gotta say, I took her to Stonington, which is right next to Mystic,
Yep.
and I was looking at a hotel, and then I came back and got her from the car. She was there 15 minutes. I was checking the
Oh,
weather.
good. Oh, good.
It's I feel so guilty.
Oh,
And then I took her on a long walk. I saw this little pocket beach. There were no signs, so I took her there and we were romping around. She was digging in the sand. She was living her best life. And this other man who was on the beach was giving me the stink eye. And I thought, why are you giving me the stink eye? I'm allowed on this beach. There are no signs. And then I went out the other exit. Big sign, no dogs, no pets.
it's
But, you
funny,
know,
the pet piece that I wrote, there were so many comments.
ah,
There's like, there people have very strong opinions about pets and about traveling with pets and whatever, but,
yeah,
I think, the really important things are talk to your vet. Make sure you connect with a USDA accredited vet for any paperwork,
right.
and they can really guide you through the things and bring up things you might not even think about, and do your homework on what all the carriers and all those things just so you have an idea yourself, right? Because it also can be really expensive. You wanna pet proof everything, which we've talked about, and also, another thing that I thought was really interesting is, and made me realize that my dog's microchip had expired, was
Oh, I
that
didn't know that could happen.
so
Wow.
you have to up it on an annual basis.
Huh.
So which I didn't realize. So one of the tips was make sure your pet is microchipped and that the microchip is compliant with international travel requirements if you are actually traveling internationally. And so I looked online and it said that it was expired. And I was it so yes, like even
Yeah,
things like
lots you have to
that.
do. I
And
gotta
I
ask
think
you,
yeah.
before you go on, about the comments. Did you have a lot of angry people who didn't think people should be traveling with pets? Was that
Uh
uh,
I think there were yes. I mean, I just it made me laugh because, you never know what's going to resonate with people or, cause commentary, but there were definitely a lot of people in the comments who, like, do not want people traveling with their pets and, find it to be someone had also, like, tracked me down on my personal email and wrote, I mean, which is happens all the time. I'm sure it happens all the time to you, but,
wow.
had written a note saying that, many years ago, I got a few variations of this that basically, like, that there was someone, like, in their family that was allergic to, a pet and, to dogs and that that the dog came by on the somehow on the train and that, that they had
Mm,
an attack or their family had an attack. Like, those are, like, real concerns, but there was
sure.
some pet rage, which is, like it's funny when you see, what people think. So, yes, some people do not love cats and dogs.
Really interesting
Therefore
stuff. Well, it is a terrific article. I
thank
thank you
you.
so much for appearing on the Frommer Travel Show. It's been a delight speaking with you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And that is it for this week's show. I thank you so much for listening. And to those who are traveling, may I wish you a hearty bon voyage. I'll see you next week.